Grayson Whitmore's mansion towered over the city like a silent monument to wealth and isolation. Its gleaming marble floors and glittering chandeliers envied by everyone who saw them, yet suffocating to the man who lived within. Every surface reflected perfection, but for Grayson, that perfection was a cruel reminder of what he lacked. For behind the polished image of America's most eligible bachelor lay a man broken by a secret diagnosis whispered only in sterile doctors' offices and buried in the deepest corner of his heart. He could never have children, and in his world, where legacy was currency and heirs were expectations, that truth was both curse and chains. Years ago, the revelation shattered his engagement, tore apart friendships, and hardened him into someone the tabloids worshipped but no one truly knew. A man who drowned in business meetings by day and bourbon by night, who locked his vulnerability behind walls of cold charisma. He filled his life with acquisitions, deals, and headlines. Yet the echo of an empty home followed him everywhere, gnawing at him in the quiet hours when success felt hollow. Into this meticulously guarded world stepped Isla Monroe, a young maid whose arrival seemed insignificant to everyone but fate itself. Isla came not from privilege, but from sacrifice, raised in a small town where bills piled faster than dreams, and where every choice she made carried the weight of her younger sister's survival. Desperation drove her to the Whitmore estate, a job that promised stability but demanded invisibility. Yet invisibility was impossible when one possessed the quiet grace Isla carried in every step. Her auburn hair catching sunlight through stained glass windows, her emerald green eyes soft yet strong, her presence so gentle it stirred something long dormant in the mansion's frozen halls. She moved through rooms as if she belonged to none. It cared for all, humming faint lullabies while she dusted forgotten shelves, leaving traces of warmth where there had only been cold for years. At first, Grayson barely registered her, another staff member in an endless line of nameless faces. But soon, against his will, he began to notice the smallest things. How her laughter slipped out unexpectedly and lingered like a melody he didn't know he missed. How she comforted nervous staff with quiet words no one else heard. How she paused in the garden each morning to breathe in the scent of roses, long neglected, as though even beauty forgotten deserved to be cherished. These glimpses unsettled him, for they chipped at the armor he spent years forging, exposing the man beneath who still longed for connection yet feared it more than anything. Grayson told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. Yet he found excuses to linger near wherever she worked. The library where her hands traced antique spines, the kitchen where she tied her apron with quiet determination, the grand staircase where her reflection flickered briefly in the polished banister. Isla, for her part, saw Grayson only in fragments. Headlines about his fortune, whispers about his arrogance. But the longer she stayed, the more contradictions emerged. The way he treated staff with unexpected respect, the moments of silence where his gaze carried loneliness rather than pride, the rare evenings she caught him alone by the window, staring at the city lights as though searching for something beyond them. Neither of them spoke of the invisible tension blooming between them, yet both felt it, a magnetic pull neither welcomed nor resisted. A connection born not of luxury or desire, but of shared solitude. Their lives should have remained parallel lines, hers humble, his opulent. But destiny has never cared for boundaries, and the thread woven between them that first day would soon tighten into something neither could cut, drawing them toward a storm of love, betrayal, and sacrifice neither dared imagine. A storm that would test the very core of who they were and what they believed they deserved. The night of the Whitmore Charity Gala was meant to dazzle the city's elite with sparkling gowns, clinking glasses, and a carefully curated image of perfection. Yet beneath the chandeliers and string quartets lurked a cruel undercurrent of whispers that slithered like smoke through the crowded ballroom. Grayson Whitmore stood at the center of it all, tailored in black, every inch the untouchable billionaire the world adored. But as laughter rippled around him, fragments of hushed conversations reached his ears, snatches of gossip about his inability to continue the Whitmore legacy, murmurs so sharp they sliced through the layers of composure he wore like armor. And though no one said the words directly to his face, he could feel their weight pressing against him, mocking him. Those rumors, planted with meticulous malice by Caleb Harrington, his former friend turned bitter rival, struck precisely where Grayson was most vulnerable, reopening wounds he thought he'd buried years ago. Rage burned in his chest, humiliation curdled in his veins, and without a word he slipped away from the glittering chaos, retreating into the shadowed corridors of his mansion until he reached the sanctuary of his study, a sanctuary that felt anything but safe tonight. The heavy oak door closed with a thud behind him, muffling the sounds of the gala but amplifying the silence of his own thoughts. He poured bourbon into a crystal glass with hands that trembled only slightly, staring into the amber liquid as though it held answers to questions he had never dared ask. Memories crashed over him. Broken engagements, sterile doctor's offices, his mother's disappointed stare, all merging into a single truth he could not outrun. No amount of wealth could silence the ache of a legacy unfulfilled. Somewhere in the mansion, Isla Monroe was fulfilling a quiet task, sent upstairs to retrieve a fresh suit for the master of the house, unaware she was about to step into the rawest moment of his life. Her footsteps were soft against the carpet as she approached the study, hesitant to intrude, the weight of whispered instructions heavy in her hands. She knocked gently, received no answer, and pushed the door open just enough to see him. Grayson Whitmore, the untouchable billionaire, hunched over in dim light, shoulders heavy, glass in hand, his polished mask shattered. For a heartbeat she froze, caught between duty and the unexpected pang of sympathy that surged through her. He lifted his gaze, eyes glassy yet startlingly blue, and for the first time Isla saw not the man the world revered, but the man who suffered in silence. "You ever feel like the world only loves what you can give them, not who you are?" he murmured, voice low, almost to himself, as though confessing to the shadows rather than seeking an answer. Isla stepped further into the room, her presence tentative yet grounding, and in that fragile moment something shifted. Her reply, quiet but fierce, cut through the suffocating air. "Maybe you need someone who loves you, not your last name." The words hung between them, uninvited yet impossible to ignore, and Grayson stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, not as an employee, not as a stranger, but as someone who might understand the ache he never admitted aloud. Outside, the muffled hum of the gala continued, oblivious to the silent spark igniting behind the closed door. Isla set the fresh suit down carefully, her fingers lingering against the fabric as if anchoring herself in reality, while Grayson remained seated, torn between retreating further into his solitude or reaching toward the unexpected solace standing before him. Neither spoke again, yet in the shared quiet something unspoken bloomed, a fragile connection born of mutual wounds and quiet understanding, delicate yet powerful enough to alter the course of both their lives, a thread of destiny pulling tighter with every heartbeat, preparing them for a storm neither saw coming. The day of their wedding arrived like a dream dressed in deception, the Whitmore estate transformed into a scene of flawless beauty for the cameras and the curious eyes of society. White roses cascaded over marble railings, crystal chandeliers glimmered above guests dressed in couture, and the air was thick with the hum of whispered speculation about the unlikely union between the billionaire heir and the maid no one had seen before this moment. Isla Monroe stood at the end of the grand aisle, her heart pounding so loudly she feared the entire room could hear it, her hands trembling against the delicate bouquet she held. Not from excitement, but from the collision of fear, sacrifice, and a secret yearning she couldn't silence. The gown she wore was breathtaking, layers of satin and lace sculpted to perfection. Yet beneath the flawless exterior, her soul quivered, knowing every vow spoken today was for show, every promise an unspoken lie crafted to protect his name and save her family. Grayson Whitmore waited at the altar, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, his blue eyes unreadable behind a mask of composure, the weight of expectation pressing down on him from every corner of the room. His mother's piercing gaze, the press cameras flashing, the murmurs of business allies who saw this marriage not as love, but as strategy. As the ceremony began, their voices wove hollow vows into the air, words that sounded beautiful but carried no truth, each syllable a quiet ache they both felt in their chests. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, applause erupted, and flashes from photographers lit the room like lightning. Yet beneath the facade their hearts whispered truths neither dared speak aloud. That this union was a shield, not a sanctuary. The reception blurred into endless handshakes and forced smiles, Isla's cheeks aching from pretending. Gray's On's patience fraying as whispers about his past nipped at his heels. But later, away from the crowd, when they stepped into the quiet of the mansion's private wing, silence settled between them like a living thing, heavy but strangely comforting. Grayson, true to his word, protected her fiercely in public, holding her hand, guiding her through the chaos with a steady presence. Yet privately, he built walls higher than ever, retreating into solitude each night, terrified that letting her closer would expose wounds he'd spent years hiding. Isla, though hurt by his distance, found herself unable to hate him. His quiet kindness, the way he shielded her from cruelty, the glimpses of vulnerability she caught when he thought no one was watching. They all chipped away at her defenses, making her heart ache in ways she didn't understand. Living under the same roof blurred the lines between pretense and reality. Shared breakfasts where stolen glances lingered too long. Late-night talks in the kitchen where laughter slipped out unexpectedly. Quiet evenings in the library where silence felt strangely intimate. The mansion, once cold and lifeless, began to hum with warmth again, but shadows lingered at every corner. Evelyn Whitmore's watchful eyes followed Isla's every move, her disapproval hidden behind polite smiles but sharp enough to wound. And beyond the gates, Caleb Harrington plodded in silence, feeding rumors and watching for cracks in their fragile arrangement, determined to destroy Grayson and claim the woman who had unknowingly captured his own obsession. As weeks passed, Isla and Grayson found themselves caught in a delicate dance between duty and forbidden feeling, their hearts inching closer despite every reason to stay apart, unaware that forces outside their control were already conspiring to tear them apart. The storm arrived without warning, wind howling through the towering pines surrounding the Whitmore estate, rain slamming against the vast windows as lightning carved jagged scars across the darkened sky. Inside, the mansion trembled under the weight of the tempest, its usual brilliance swallowed by sudden darkness as the power flickered and died, plunging every corridor into a hush broken only by distant thunder. Grayson, returning late from a business meeting, stepped into this eerie silence, his polished shoes echoing faintly on marble floors, lit only by erratic flashes of lightning. He found the servants scattered, fumbling for candles, whispers of unease floating through the halls, but amid the chaos, one question anchored him. Where was Isla? He searched instinctively, heart pounding for reasons he dared not name, until he found her in the library, curled into the velvet armchair by the tall arched window, wrapped in a blanket far too thin to chase away the chill. Candlelight flickered over her tear-streaked face, emerald eyes glistening as she quickly wiped them, as if ashamed to be caught vulnerable. Grayson stepped closer, voice low yet uncharacteristically gentle. "Why are you crying?" The question shattered her fragile composure, and with trembling lips she whispered the truth she'd buried for weeks. "Because I married you for survival, but somewhere along the way, I started loving you." Her confession crashed through him like the storm outside, unraveling every defense he'd so carefully built. For months he'd feared this, feared that letting her close would expose the hollowness inside him, the shame of his broken legacy, the belief that he was unworthy of being loved. But hearing her words, he felt something break open, not in pain, but in release. "I've been afraid to love you, Isla," he admitted, voice raw, eyes burning, "because I didn't think I deserved you." A silence followed, thick yet tender, heavy with truths finally set free. Slowly, as if every step were a vow, Grayson crossed the room until he stood before her, the flicker of candlelight softening the sharp planes of his face, revealing not the Millionaire the world idolized but the man aching for connection. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out, fingers brushing her cheek, the warmth of her skin grounding him in a reality more precious than any fortune he possessed. Isla's breath hitched, heart hammering as she leaned into his touch, her own hands rising to rest against his chest, feeling the rapid beat that mirrored her own. Then, with no need for words, they closed the distance, lips meeting in a kiss, not of passion, but of healing, slow and reverent, a promise whispered against the storm. They didn't rush, didn't seek to escape into fire or frenzy, instead savoring the quiet miracle of finding solace in each other's brokenness. Outside, thunder roared and rain battered the windows, but within the library a different storm bloomed, one of quiet surrender, of two guarded hearts daring, at last, to believe in love. The storm that had bound their hearts that night faded into memory, giving way to a fragile peace in the weeks that followed, a quiet rhythm of mornings spent in tentative smiles and evenings filled with unspoken promises neither dared to name. Yet love, even when unacknowledged, has a way of reshaping everything, and as the seasons turned, the mansion's once cold corridors seemed to hum with new warmth. Until the day Isla collapsed, her soft cry echoing from the kitchen like a gunshot that shattered their delicate world. Grayson was there in seconds, catching her trembling body before it hit the marble floor. Panic clawing through his chest as he called for help, voice cracking in terror he never knew he could feel. The doctor's arrival brought chaos. The sharp scent of antiseptic, the quiet urgency of whispered instructions, and then words that stopped time itself. "She's pregnant, with twins." For Grayson, the sentence was a miracle wrapped in disbelief, a gift he had once been told would never be his, a chance at fatherhood he had mourned long ago. His hands trembled as he touched Isla's cheek, blue eyes wide with wonder and terror all at once, heart daring to hope yet terrified to believe. But hope, Fragile as glass can shatter under the weight of doubt, and that doubt came swiftly in the form of Evelyn Whitmore's icy voice, cutting through the room like a blade. "A scandal," she hissed, face pale with fury. "Those children cannot be his, they must be someone else's." Her accusation ignited a storm no less violent than the one outside months ago, unleashing whispers through staff corridors and echoing in the halls of the city's elite. Caleb Harrington, ever watchful, seized the chaos with serpent-like precision, feeding rumors to the press, insinuating that Isla's pregnancy was proof of infidelity, poisoning Grayson's name and tightening the noose of scandal around them both. And though Grayson defended her fiercely in public, inside him an old wound reopened, the cruel memory of every doctor's verdict whispering in his mind, "You can never be a father," until fear drowned out reason. Late one night, unable to silence the war inside him, he found Isla alone in the dimly lit nursery she had begun to prepare, her hands tracing the edge of a crib with quiet wonder. His voice, rough and trembling, broke the silence. "Tell me, are they mine?" The question sliced through Isla's heart, deeper than any insult, deeper than Evelyn's scorn or Caleb's venom, because it came from the man she loved, the one she thought believed in her when no one else did. Her tears fell silently, cascading onto trembling hands that clutched her swollen belly as she choked back a sob too heavy to contain. She didn't scream, didn't plead, didn't fight. Her silence was her answer, an answer that shattered Grayson even as it destroyed her. In that unbearable stillness, something precious between them fractured beyond repair, leaving only grief in its wake. At dawn, Isla packed what little she owned, her fingers shaking as she folded tiny baby clothes she had bought in secret moments of joy. Her heart breaking with each quiet step toward the door. She left no note, no farewell, only the echo of her absence reverberating through marble halls that had once felt alive but now rang hollow again. As the heavy doors closed behind her, the mansion returned to silence, colder, emptier, and lonelier than ever, a graveyard of love undone by fear. Outside, dawn broke over a gray sky, painting the world in muted colors as Isla stepped into uncertainty, vowing to raise the twins alone, far from the lies, judgment, and whispered doubts that had destroyed her chance at happiness, unaware that this painful departure was only the beginning of a storm far greater than either of them could yet imagine. 2 years passed, yet for Grayson Whitmore, each day felt like penance carved into time itself. The grand mansion remained immaculate to the world's eye, but inside, dust settled where laughter once lived. Corridors echoed with footsteps that no longer belonged to anyone he loved, and every success he amassed in business felt hollow in the quiet moments before sleep when he reached instinctively for someone who was no longer there. He had searched for Isla, scouring city after city, hiring investigators, chasing whispers of her presence across small towns and forgotten roads. Yet she remained a ghost in his life, vanishing beyond the reach of even his immense fortune. In her absence, he faced himself, stripped of excuses, haunted by the memory of the night he'd questioned her faithfulness and driven her away. The image of her tears seared into his soul like a wound that refused to heal. Meanwhile, in a quiet town far from the relentless scrutiny of New York society, Isla raised their twins in a modest cottage, her days filled with laughter and scraped knees, bedtime stories and lullabies. Yet each night as she watched her children sleep, she felt the familiar ache, a mixture of pride and grief, for the father they deserved but could not have, or so she believed. She shielded them from the cruelty of whispers, taught them kindness in a world that had shown her little, and prayed silently that the man she once loved had found peace, even if it was without her. Fate, however, has a way of circling back to unfinished stories, and it chose the most ordinary of places, a small-town fair humming with the scent of candied apples and the sound of carousel music, to reunite what pain had torn apart. Grayson had come to the fair on a whim, seeking escape from yet another hollow gala. His tailored suit replaced by rolled-up sleeves and weariness etched into the lines of his face, unaware that destiny waited between cotton candy stalls and Ferris wheel lights. It happened in a heartbeat. 2 toddlers racing past him, giggling, their emerald eyes startlingly familiar, their smiles an echo of his own childhood photographs. Time slowed to a crawl as realization crashed over him, stealing the breath from his lungs, rooting him to the spot. When he turned, he saw her, Isla Monroe, holding their children's hands, hair longer now, face softer yet marked by quiet strength, her emerald gaze colliding with his across the blur of the crowd. Shock flared first, followed by disbelief, then an avalanche of emotion too vast to name. Grief, longing, hope, regret, all converging in the single moment their eyes met. Isla froze, her heart hammering in her chest, every instinct screaming to run, yet unable to move as memories she had fought to bury surged to the surface. The night of the storm, the hollow vows, the miracle she had carried alone, the question that had broken her. Neither spoke at first, the world around them fading to muted noise, carnival lights flickering like stars and the silence stretching between them. When Grayson finally found his voice, it trembled with raw honesty he no longer had the strength to hide. "I looked everywhere for you," he choked, tears glistening unshed, every syllable a confession of sleepless nights and relentless searching. Isla's lip, his parted words catching like fragile glass in her throat before spilling softly, painfully. "I couldn't let them grow up in a war of hate." Her voice cracked on the word hate, and in that moment Grayson understood the depth of pain his doubt had caused, the walls she had built to protect their children from a world too cruel to deserve them. He stepped closer, ignoring the stares of strangers, sinking to his knees on the dusty fairground path before the twins whose wide eyes stared at him with innocent curiosity, unaware of the history carried in the silence between the adults. Tears broke free as he reached out, voice shaking yet steady in devotion. "I don't care what anyone says. You're my miracle." The twins, confused but sensing love, reached toward him, tiny hands brushing his tear-wet cheeks. And something inside Grayson fractured and healed all at once. Isla's own tears spilled freely then, unable to hold back the tidal wave of emotion as she watched father and children meet for the first time, the ache of years dissolving into something raw and redemptive. Grayson rose slowly, facing her fully now, every barrier stripped away, the man before her no longer the guarded billionaire but someone humbled by loss, remade by love. "Marry me again," he whispered, voice thick with hope and fear. "Not for a year, not for appearances, for love, for forever." The words hung in the air, trembling with sincerity, daring her to believe in a future neither of them thought they deserved. Isla's breath caught, heart pounding as memories collided with present reality. Every wound, every joy, every sleepless night leading to this single moment. She saw the man who had doubted her yet changed, the father kneeling to meet his children, the lover who had always haunted her dreams, and her answer came not in grand speeches, but in the quiet sob that broke free as she whispered through, tears. "Yes." The world seemed to exhale as they closed the distance, hands trembling as they intertwined, pulling each other close in a desperate, healing embrace under the glow of carnival, lights and distant fireworks. Around them, the fair continued, children laughing, rides spinning, music playing. Yet for Grayson and Isla, time had stilled, the noise of the world drowned out by the quiet miracle of family found again. As the twins giggled and tugged at their parents' hands, Grayson pressed his forehead to Isla's, whispering promises too sacred for anyone else to hear, promises of never letting go, of love unbound by fear, of a forever built not on appearances but on truth. In that humble fairground surrounded by strangers, a billionaire who once believed himself cursed and a maid who once believed herself unworthy finally found everything they had been searching for, not in fortune or legacy, but in each other, and in the tiny hands tugging at their hearts, leading them home.